What is HiViCron versus HiViFlu? And what exactly do I mean when I talk about it? This is an area of exploration of science. Rather than a simple update, I am showing you how I process what it is that I do. This is why I make predictions, and sometimes, not absolutely all the time, my predictions are largely correct because I'm not guessing, I'm just simply looking at the science and trying to integrate it. And so, what I'll be talking about today is a surge of influenza in India. And if you haven't forgotten, one of the patterns that we noticed early in the pandemic was when there was a surge of COVID in India. And at that time, there were lots of deaths, and a lot of people ignored it, thinking, well, it's just India. That was the Delta variant of COVID. And believe me, it swept the world. And so I've learned you don't ignore patterns when they're occurring early. What you do is you observe them and see what you can make of it. So there are two things that I'm doing here is that I'm reflecting on the recent presentation with Gert van den Bosch and his view on Hivicron, which is a highly evasive immune variant of Omicron, and he expects that this could cause serious damage in terms of the health across the world. So, what I'm talking about today is as I was reflecting on the ideas, I thought of what would be HiViFlu. In that sense, I'm literally flipping the coin on the HiVicron because the reason why Gert was predicting this Omicron variant was largely because of T cell silencing. And the problem with T cell silencing is that if the immune system is suppressed, not only will COVID spread, but also other viruses and some bacteria. So, this is the angle that I'm talking about. And in case you're just meeting me, you have to realize I've been doing this for a very long time. And so, here is an example. This is my Substack. And you may not be able to see this. Let me just see if I can make it bigger. This was in January of 2022. Nobody really saw this post. And what it had here was I'd Rather Be Wrong series. And at that time, I anticipated what we're seeing now simply because of what was happening in the immune system. And I called it I'd Rather Be Wrong series because based on what I was seeing with the science, I predicted that this would be an outcome if the patterns continued. That's what I mean. And so when you're listening to me now, it is again an extrapolation of the science. I will explain to you why I think what is likely to happen, and it's up to you whether or not you accept that science or not. So I'm just taking you on this journey. So let's do a quick update on some basics. Okay. And when I work, many of the slides, I've got hundreds of slides, maybe 500, 600 slides from many different presentations. And if you look in the description, one of the presentations was how to prepare for the next wave of COVID. I did this maybe a year and a half ago. It is still applicable today. I may do some updates to it. So please look in the description if you're interested in that. Now, here is where a lot of my work is done in BioRender. And this is where I'm able to adjust some of these things so I can move things around and I get templates that I can work with. And in this case here, I'm just giving you an update as to what it is Gert was talking about. Here is one of the slides that I may adjust. And what he was pointing out is that when your immune system is operating, you have B cells, which produce antibodies, and they will prevent the virus from binding, or it will bind to the surface of the cell and target the immune system at these cells. So this is what everybody has been talking about, antibodies and humoral immunity. But you also have, on the other side, you have cytotoxic T cells. And so these cytotoxic T cells what they do is that they will target an infected cell and they will kill it. They will destroy the cell. So the difference between the antibodies here is that they target the virus. So if you have 1,000 viral particles, you need multiple antibodies, as opposed to the T cell, which doesn't target the virus directly, but targets any cell that is infected with the virus. Okay? These are cytotoxic T cells and an important part of the immune system. But this wasn't really what Gert was talking about when he was talking about the evasion of the immune system. And it took me some time to work through what it is that he was making reference to. So follow along. This is where I'm taking the pieces together. So now I have a differentiation into three sections. You have the CD8 cells that I said destroy the cell that is infected, the B cell that produces the antibodies. But here is another cell, CD4 helper cell. And this cell is like the master coordinator. It produces the cytokines that activates the T cells and the B cells. And what Gert was saying is that this cell is now, or he's predicting, will be evaded by the current variant and the new variant. Okay. And that's what he describes as a HiViCron. And how it works in that context, and now I'm showing you another slide that I've been working on. How it works in that context is that normally these immune cells will then activate after an antigen has been presented. They produce cytokines which activate these cytotoxic T cells to kill the cell, or they activate to produce antibodies which will bind the virus. If you then take this out of the equation, suddenly you have no coordination and a silencing of this immune system. Okay? And that's the essence of what Gert is saying, is that he's expecting a HiViCron variant to appear that will silence the T cells because it has evaded them. Now let me just integrate that with what I've been looking at, because I have the luxury of listening to experts in their own fields, virology and immunology, Gert, and vaccine development. I have spoken to many researchers, clinicians, and I see patients, and I do independent research. So I get to integrate all of these ideas into a coherent thought. And this then becomes my thought, because I realize that there are some practical issues about the immune system. And when I described it recently in this HiViCron presentation, I still think this is very important, is that when I was looking at what Gert was expecting, I divided it into the persistent infection, immune dysregulation, smoldering inflammation, metabolic collapse, and early stage viral sepsis. And the reason I did that, because I recognize that different segments of the population are at different stages in terms of their capability at handling these viruses. Okay, so that's the starting point. And one of the problems is that when we look at what happens with infection, because of how we have the infection occurs, and you have to remember that COVID doesn't just interact with cells and destroy them, it also has an impact on the immune system. And this, I think, is a very important point. Now, when we was discussing with Gert, I made this point, is that this is the overview of the immune system. And if everything is working fine, you have a lot of tools to fight against the virus. But one of the things that happens is, because of the fact that the SARS-CoV-2 virus has the capability not only to infect the cells and produce more viruses, but it also infects immune cells. And what it then does, it has an impact on how effectively they function. And this is especially important with regards to T cells. So there are two aspects to this that I have been highlighting, which is that you have the potential of an Omicron evasive variant that the T cells can't respond to. And you also have the potential with people who are recurrently getting infected, they have silencing of their TB and natural killer cells because of viral infection. So the same thing happens, but by different mechanisms and in different time frames. So this is the starting point, as I say, when I think about where the population is. So at the moment, depending on what has happened, will determine where each individual is in this spectrum if there is a highly evasive HiViCron virus. The person who has no immunity left will just have viral sepsis. Other people who have a bit of fight may end up with a metabolic collapse. That's how I look at it, okay? So this is the starting frame to take you now to what is happening today, okay? So what happened is that it caught my attention today, and I'll show you the news story so that you understand what's going on. This is from India today, not common flu, but H3N2, making it difficult to recover from viral infections. So hospitals in New Delhi are witnessing a rise in severe flu cases caused by the H3N2 influenza virus, leading to prolonged fever and in many cases hospitalization. Okay. So this is happening in Delhi at the moment. Now, it's important to note that this is not a global thing that is happening yet. Okay. So follow along. When we look at the WHO tells us from a global perspective, the influenza update on the 24th of September 2025, number 545, is that at the moment, with their surveillance, globally, influenza activity remained low, primarily influenza A viruses. And that's what you have in India at the moment, the H3N2. And so at the moment, there is no major concern. But again, you have to read between the lines. So follow along here. So in this case, what has caught my attention was the extent. And so here, this news story from India from about the 15th of September, when they look at what's happening in Delhi, 69% of households had at least one person affected with this flu virus. They did a survey of 11,000 households, of which 69% reported at least one member displaying symptoms of fever, cough, sore throat, and respiratory distress. And so this was higher than earlier in the year when it was 54% of households reporting similar symptoms. So this is a significant rise. When we pull these together, what I of the fact that we are likely to be seeing a combined COVID and influenza circulation. So the COVID depletes the immune system, which is then followed by influenza, which then runs rampant because the immune system is unable to effectively respond to the influenza virus. It's like a co-infection, one and then the other. So once I start to see those patterns, I presume that we're having high circulation of COVID followed by circulation of other viruses. So this is where the double whammy comes in. And so this is why I came up with this concept of HiViCron versus HiViFlu. In reality, I'm beginning to realize that they may be one and the same, in that it's a double whammy, double blow, one first, then the other. And so when you have a population, and this is happening across much of the Western world, highly vaccinated regions. And my explanation for this, even though people don't like me to say this, because as far as the general consensus is if a population is highly vaccinated, they are more protected than a population that has natural immunity. I think Papua New Guinea and Haiti would beg to differ. The point is that at the moment, because their immune focus is so much on the original Wuhan spike protein, it has skewed the immune system in a way that makes it less effective against ongoing variants. Again, this may be inconvenient. You can consider that my opinion. Don't consider that a fact. But if you don't believe me, just look at where in the world is being primarily affected by high circulation of COVID. So here is where I think the problem lies. As I reflect and I look forward to what it is that Gert has been talking about, because in his view, he is expecting an absolutely horrendous variant to appear. Okay. And based on his position, I think that this is what he is expecting, the stage 5 of my presentation. And this is what it looked like. So in stage 5, I predicted end-stage viral sepsis, immune exhaustion. And as I said, this is the last stage that could occur in segments of the population. And at that time, these are oftentimes frail elderly, advanced immunosuppressed, burnt out. They often look very sick, confused, very septic, elevated inflammatory markers, multi-organ dysfunction, including secondary infections and organ failure. So not only do they get viral infections, but the viral infection predisposes them to bacterial infections, and they don't have the immune system to fight against it. And that stage 5 is pretty serious. It's like, in my view, irreversible shock, where if somebody's losing blood, there comes a point where if they've lost so much blood, even if you get blood in and fluids and inotropes, you can't pull them back from a spiral going down. And that's the view, my view, with regards to that stage 5. The difference is that I suspect it will be a combination of COVID and another rapidly spreading, more lethal virus. And this is why I call it the HiViCron versus the HiViFlu. I suspect, and this is now again me extrapolating. So please, if anyone asks you, I am just sharing you my thoughts and my extrapolation of the science. I think, based on what I'm observing, that for a lot of the population who are certainly floating around the hospital environment, they have limited immune response left. It's almost as if they are now running on fumes. The tank has nothing left. It seems as though they can't properly clear COVID viruses. And so what happens is you end up with a chronic infection and then a chronic immune dysregulation. They are then more vulnerable to multiple other infections. And how you will notice is that they get infection after infection after infection. Appetite is going. They just don't look well and don't seem to be able to bounce back and recover. When you have a cohort like that, and then you have on top of it a rapidly spreading influenza, because the problem then becomes at a population level, the population is unable to respond effectively to the influenza virus. So normally, influenza is not so easily spread. You really need a space where a certain amount of droplets are spread. And if somebody, because people get symptoms, they usually only have about 24 hours between the time that they may be able to spread it and the time they feel unwell and they go home. And so therefore they are not in a position to spread. What I think is likely to happen now, because of interferon suppression, because of the virus, they will not really get those symptoms. And so a significant proportion of the population will potentially have influenza on top of COVID, limited symptoms, and be circulating it all around. The people who are most vulnerable then have no ability to fight it off. That's what I suspect is likely to happen. Now, will it happen this winter? I don't know, but all the signs are there that if a variant, or not at this point, it's just any influenza variant, because the immunity, the population immunity can't control it. So this surge of influenza that comes seasonally every year, I suspect could be far more lethal this time around in the Northern Hemisphere. We need to prepare for those things. And the question is, what do you do? As I said, look in the description before. I have some ideas as how to prepare for the next COVID wave. And believe me, if you prepare for COVID, you've prepared for flu, because it is far more immune evasive. And most critically, I tell people this every time I see them with any kind of symptoms: take your time to learn about humming heroes. Humming, increasing the nitric oxide in your sinuses and nasal cavity. It's antiviral, antibacterial, anti-inflammatory. It is one of the simplest things that people can do. Please look in the description before. It is a free ebook that will give you some pages of it. If you want to support us, please buy the full version on Amazon. But the point is, hum. It is such a simple action. If you're feeling unwell, at least 3 times a day. Otherwise, just hum when you think about it. It will protect you in a time where we have limited options available for people to use. So with that in mind, yes, let's look out for what could be a difficult period of time at the moment. And I don't know, as I said, I can't predict if this is absolutely going to be happening. But based on the symptoms, this is looking as though it is highly likely. So thank you all very much. Not sure why it is that I can't adjust my uh, my screen, but normally I'll play you an outro, but for some reason it seems to have disappeared. So for the time being, until we speak again, look in the description below and have a great evening.